Hey sociology students, this is our first lesson, and so we are going to start at the very beginning just by looking at the word. So what does sociology mean and how should you define it? What we're going to do in this video is take the word apart and look at the different pieces of the word and talk about the nuances of meaning that you need to include if you're going to write a sensible, correct definition of sociology. I'm going to ask you to do some writing in class this semester, and I'm going to need to see some of these words and some of these concepts that we cover in this video in your personally written definition of sociology. Okay, so you see the word sociology on the board behind me, and I've broken it down into two pieces, the ology part and the soci part. So let's start with the ology part because that means the study of, right? You've had lots of classes in your transcript history, whether in high school or college, that end in the word ology, and it's because you are studying something. And the thing at the beginning of the word is always the what that you are studying. But it's not enough to just say that ology means the study of. Please notice that on the board, I say that you must qualify what the study of actually entails. It's not just something informal, you have insomnia and you're looking stuff up on Google and you just believe everything that you see or believe everything that you read. The study of, in order for it to be meaningful and correct, has to be approached in a scientific way. And so at the very least, when you write a definition of the word sociology, you must include something about science. So you need to say something like the scientific study of. Better, maybe, than the word scientific is the word systematic, because the word systematic is even broader. It includes the fact that you're going to use the scientific method. It includes the fact that you are going to use the process of studying so that the scientific method, the proven process of studying, so that you make sure that the data you get when you're studying is correct, it's reliable, it's valid. These key words when we're studying the research method and the scientific method in general, you want to be sure that the information you're looking at does not have a bias to it, nor does that information give you incorrect results. You want to rely on the fact that the information you're looking at is valid. And so when we study stuff in a scientific way, that's why we do it in a scientific way, to make sure that we know that there's not a bias, a slant, or it's incorrect information. There can't be assumptions that you're working from. And so the word systematic includes that, but it also includes the fact that in sociology, when you have a set of reliable data points to look at, when you have a set of, some information, qualitative information that gives you a description of somebody's life and experiences, when you have that information in front of you, sociology allows us, even requires us to have different points of view when we interpret that information. So when you use the word systematic, not only are you saying that it's the scientific study of something, but when we get that information, do we just put it on the shelf and not do anything with it? No, the systematic word includes the fact that we are going to interpret that information after we get valid, reliable data. We're going to interpret that information, and interpreting that information can take a variety of points of view. So that's why systematic is probably the best thing to use in a definition of sociology, the systematic study of what we're going to talk about next. But at least say the word scientific, because scientific is, that's inclusive of interpreting the data at the end, but it might not be clear about what sort of interpretation has to happen. So the scientific study of, or the systematic study of, we're going to be talking about the systems that we can use to study society as we move forward. That's what this class is about. So let's look at the soci part of this definition, and this has two sides to it, okay? So from soci, I've got like two arrows coming down, and I mentioned it has two parts to this. Because soci refers to society or social life. That's two parts. Society level is the big picture, the entire government, the entire nation, our economic structure, how it's linked to all the other continents. That's huge, right? But that's part of daily social life. And so soci includes that huge society level part of the picture where you're looking at social structure, like the criminal justice system linked to the education system, linked to the family structure, linked to entertainment, linked to marriage patterns. All of these different kinds of things are overarching patterns that individual personal level life is lived out within. Is that a, wow, that's a run-on sentence. Don't tell Miss Dudley that I used that run-on sentence. But anyway, so you have two parts to this. You've got society level, the big picture. We call it macro sociology. That's going to be what the next lesson is about. And you've got the personal level or micro sociology, where we look at how do humans interact with each other? What are the social rules that are really supposed to be followed when we interact with somebody? I spent some time with some people from Japan this summer, and the table manners in Japan are very, very different. What's considered polite or impolite in Japan with table manners is very different than what somebody in the USA thinks is polite or impolite. So in the USA, if we burp at the table, it's supposed to, wow, you're supposed to be embarrassed about that. You're supposed to say, excuse me. It's something that you're not supposed to do in polite company. There's my air quotes, is burp at the table, for instance. But in Japan, if you don't burp, you're offending the cook. You're supposed to do that as kind of a way to say, hey, this is delicious, kind of thing. And so I remember, in my mind, I thought, wow, I'm interacting in my mind just about forming opinions about people and things just based on whether they have the same customs as me from one place to the next, right? So I had to stop myself and be like, no, I don't need to apply my rules to another country's habits, another country's way of life. But it creates like a pattern of human interaction, right? And so how do we behave with each other? How do we interact with each other? Not from a psychology standpoint, not from a personality type standpoint, not from a brain synapse kind of standpoint, like human behavior is approached in a psychology class. But in sociology class, we're going to look at social rules that apply to the way we interpret situations, the way that we navigate our daily life, the decisions that we make, the the communication patterns that we take. So that's the personal level side to sociology. The society level side is that matrix. Notice down here I have the word matrix in quotes because we use it so often in common speech these days. If you've seen that movie, which it's a golden oldie now, so if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. So, think of the matrix as this code that is, this computer code, and all of us are these little, dots, not dots and dashes, that's Morse code. All of us are like ones and zeros, the little bits and bytes in the computer program. And so society really is kind of like that. It has a pattern that we are supposed to follow. It has norms, it has customs and rituals and behaviors and expectations that we place on each other based on those things. And so the connection between this society level stuff, social structure and social institutions, which we will investigate here shortly, these things exist as like an umbrella pattern over us that control our or guide. Let me say the word guide instead of control. That sounds a little bit, I don't know, sinister or something. And it's not at all sinister. It is a pattern that we all have to follow, because if we find ourselves living in the USA today, we are subject to the pattern that exists over us, whether we think about it or not. And so it affects our personal level human interaction, our small group behavior. And so in sociology, what we're going to study this semester is we're going to study ourselves. But we're going to study ourselves in a way that perhaps you've never really considered before, because we're going to look at macro scale, macro sociology stuff and how it affects our micro sociology, personal level, human interaction stuff. So can you write a definition of sociology from all of this jumble that I have on the board behind me? I hope you will, because I told you why, for instance, you had to explain scientific and systematic. And so you need to explain to yourself, even though I only have the word why written on the board here, you've got to go further with your notes and answer the question why. Why? Because systematic includes the scientific method, but it also includes interpretation. Why does scientific have to be there? Well, because we have to have valid and reliable data. We can't just suppose, we can't just assume. That's incorrect, right? And what does Soci mean? It has two parts. It has macro and micro. I've said those words a couple times. Maybe you want to write them down in your notes. I don't have them written on the board back here, but since I've emphasized them in the video, maybe they're important, and they are coming up in another video. But society level is the big picture, and personal level is the small picture. And we're studying both sides of that coin, but we don't just do this side and that side, because the coin has a thickness to it, right? And so we're going to study that connection between one side to the next, because the structural side is connected to the personal side, guides our behavior, controls our behavior, if you want to go back to that word that I used a minute ago. But anyway, this is what we're going to focus on this semester. It's wonderful stuff, y'all, and I think it's going to really help the way that you understand the world around you. And if I haven't said it before, it's just going to make you feel more confident about your knowledge and your ability to navigate your life on your own and in conjunction with other people who are out there on the journey with you. So I will see you in the next video. Take a lot of notes. Bye.